If you don't know what your differentiation strategy is, how can you do anything? I mean, for God's sakes, what are you doing every day if you don't know how you're going to be different?
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Ignition Path Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Goodknight. Before we get to our guest today, I just want to make sure that if you're listening to this podcast and you hear something that resonates with you, please share this with someone that you know. We here on Ignition Path Podcast, we talk about the path that entrepreneurs take or have taken in their life to get to where they are, talk about what they do, what they're bringing to the world now, and how they're changing things. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and we'll get to our guest. Right now, I have Mr. Roy Osing on with me. Roy, how are you doing, sir?
Exceedingly well, Kyle. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. It was my pleasure. You know, I have a pre-call with all of my guests, and I'll tell you what, I mean, Roy's was one of my very memorable pre-calls. I think we talked for almost an hour and a half.
Yay, right. Yes,
so,
we did.
It was almost funny. Like, darn it, I should have hit record on that one. Like, this was so authentic. So
that's right. Well, we'll see if we can replicate it.
Yeah, and if not, I'm sure you and I are the type of people that we can make a whole new fun situation.
Absolutely.
So go ahead and tell everybody, who you are, what you do, a little bit about your background, your path through the entrepreneurship, and we'll go from there.
Sure. I think, just to kind of cap and gown it, I was fortunate enough back in the day to be asked to create an organization around the opportunities that the internet in a telecom world were presenting. And I was basically told to go ahead and maximize the potential that we could get out of that opportunity. And so we basically took an early stage data company, and we built it into $1 billion a year in annual revenue over time. And so that journey was an amazing journey for me personally, but it was also an amazing journey for the team of people that we had that were dedicated to customers, dedicated to growth, et cetera. So I've been working the whole notion of growth, business growth, entrepreneurism, what it takes to do that, et cetera. We actually were challenged because we were in a relatively large telco at a time when it was still a monopoly, and we had to change the culture. We had to change the focus. We had to change virtually everything towards this highly competitive, opportunistic world that we were going into. And so we learned a lot. We made a lot of mistakes. And yeah, we landed on this thing, and I get goosebumps just thinking of what we were able to achieve, because we didn't start out thinking we were going to get $1 billion. We knew the opportunity was huge, but we didn't know how huge. And so what I do now is talk about what it is that we did to actually achieve that really remarkable feat. And I'm finding that, interestingly enough, because this was a few years ago that we did this, I left my, quote, real job in 2002. People think
what was that real job?
Well, it was the president of this company that we built. We got to that level, and then I
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so corporate CEO type
it
stuff.
Was in a corporate. It was kind of like one of these incubated opportunities sitting within a corporate environment, a telco environment,
Gotcha.
Which made it exceedingly hard. And so walked away. But what I'm discovering is the things that we're going to talk about today, people think are brand new, which kind of tells me the extent to which, the sort of things that we did are actually competing with traditional academia, right? And that sort of thing that quite frankly is in the face of business people these days. And I have some issues with that, because I think we're misleading people to a degree. So I'm a disruptor. I'm a contrarian. My theme is be different or be dead. If you're not different in a way that makes sense for people, you're going to have a rough existence. And we actually put all that stuff to use as we march to $1 billion. So that's who Roy is.
That's awesome. Well, be different or be dead is definitely something that when you look up Roy's name, somewhat like myself, you can find him pretty easily on Google, but we'll give all the information about Roy by the end of the show and all the show notes, of course. But one of the main things is that I believe you wrote a book. You're an author, you're a coach, you're a speaker. So Be Different or Be Dead was an actual book that you wrote, correct?
Yeah, I've actually written a series under that title, Be Different or Be Dead. So I've written 7 books. The first one I wrote in 2009, then I wrote some ebooks around the content. And then my latest one a year and a half ago was called Be Different or Be Dead, the audacious, unheard of ways I took a startup to $1 billion in sales. And so the whole notion of differentiation is something that has been part of me since I think I was born, quite frankly, and continues to be the essence of my work, because I work with a lot of small businesses and medium businesses, et cetera, to actually help them in their challenge to be different and differentiate themselves from their competition in a way that's meaningful to customers. So that's it, and we have all sorts of fun doing it.
Yeah, and you mentioned something there when it came to having people that are starting their path, and a lot of people that listen to this podcast are maybe newer to the world of their own business, their own entrepreneurship. What are some advice that you can give that you can, the startup thing is what sparked that thought process in my head. All of us people that are, I'm essentially a startup podcaster. I mean, I've been podcasting for 5 years, but helping other people. My own podcast was a startup in about April. So, I'm not a full year into so I'm essentially a startup podcast producer, coach / host. So when it comes to giving advice about all of us that are in that startup phase, what do you consider the startup phase, and give some advice that you learned through that startup phase that you could be some nuggets that you could, and some takeaways that you can give to people on this episode.
Yeah, great question. Like I think there's three things that really strike me in terms of answering that, and in this order of priority. And the first piece, we already sort of alluded to it. The first piece would be differentiate what it is you're doing and the product and service that you've got. I find there's too many startup CEOs who have got this they think is amazing idea, and they've got all this testosterone and other hormones driving them to do this. And when I ask them the question, how is your idea any different than the other ideas out there, they stumble. And I would always say to them, look, you need to do your work. If you're not different, you're going to be one of the statistics of new businesses that die in the first 36 months, okay? So if you cannot clearly articulate and paint a picture of how you're unique relative to your competition, you're done. So that's a huge piece. Don't think about anything else. I don't want you to think about financing. I don't want you to think about just stop, because all you're going to do is burn money. So that would be the first thing. Well, let's assume that you've done that. The second piece is equally as important, and it's really all about what I would call target selection. It's all about choosing the people and the customer groups that you want to serve. And this is a huge piece, because it basically is work that says, who are the people out there, right, that have the natural demand potential to actually buy your solutions and feed your growth imperatives. Okay, you're not in the mass market game. You need to be in the target game. So find those few customer groups that have the latent potential to drive your revenue stream, and find out what they crave. I'm going to repeat that. Find out what they crave, not what they need. Okay, the problem is, if you want to compete especially as an entrepreneur, in the need space, you're in for a hard ride, because the need space fundamentally has already been satisfied. And so you're going to find a whole bunch of competition, and prices will be sensitive. And so you'll end up having to compete on price with a whole bunch of what I call red ocean competitors. So what you want to do is you want to go into what I call the craving space. The craving space is like what people desire, what they covet, what they lust for, right? What they emotionally need. And of course, what you find is there's very few players in that space, because it's kind of like a novel idea, right? The other thing is, we all buy on emotion, and so we're not very price sensitive. And so if you want to play in the craving space, you're going to find fewer, if no, competition. And secondly, the market will not be as price sensitive as it otherwise would be if you decided to go in the need space. So the second piece is be really, really specific. Do the work on your targets and what they crave. There's a lot of easy ways to figure that out. Okay, I mean, I used to do focus groups. I used to do casual meetings with people and have a conversation. And all of a sudden, you learn who they are and what they do in their life. This isn't about how they consume.
Pain points, yeah.
Yeah, it's not about how they consume internet. It's about what's their life about. So start looking at the person holistically, and it's quite amazing what you can discover. The third piece I would say is focus, 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 focus. There are too many startup CEOs.
Four focuses? One,
Yeah,
two, three,
well, I
four,
could give
four
you
focus.
6, but we don't have that much time. I mean, it's a major problem. Okay, in other words, entrepreneurs love to, first of all, because their idea tends to be technology driven, most of them that I've met, all right, they
Well, especially
chase,
nowadays with everything. Yeah.
well, of course, and that's a natural thing. And that's one of the reasons I say, no, you want to differentiate yourself first on the basis of cravings, which has got nothing to do with technology, all right? And so you need to focus on that and don't change things. I call it yummy. You want to stay away from yummy. You know, yummy is something that people love to chase because it feels good. I mean, I once did some work for a startup, and they had this wireless technology, and the guy was so infatuated with the plethora of applications of this technology, he went broke. He went broke because he didn't stick to his plan. He didn't mind the high potential segments. He didn't stay to it, and as a result, he went broke. And so, resist the temptation to chase yummy. So differentiate, target, cravings, and focus.
Focus. And then yummy, does that stand for anything?
No, it's just my way of saying it feels good, it tastes good, it satisfies your
Okay, so
your
it's
appetite.
kind of like the same. I gotcha. So
No.
I could actually probably kind of turn that into a philosophy that I've been taught, and one of my mentors who says we need to pull away from a transactional thought process and move into a relationship process.
Engagement. Yeah, I mean, it's about engaging with people. It's not about...
Yeah.
And by the way, if you trust that model, you will discover that transactions follow engagement, not the other way around. If you push to engage, you piss people off. So transactions don't generally happen, even though you start out trying to transact. And for sure, the relationship doesn't grow.
Yeah. And that's 100% the reason why I podcast. I've switched my thought process. I often talk about flipping podcasts on its head. I podcast to build relationships. I'm building a relationship with you. Our opening call, our strategy call was amazing. I cannot wait to have you as a collaborator, because you have some things that are already in process that so many people that I meet are striving for, that I could point to and collaborate them with you and you with me and you with them. So, that's why we podcast. I can tell you story after story about some amazing things, including monetizing my podcast in the first 30 days that happened not from downloads and listeners, but from interaction with my guest. And I don't do many I don't think I've done one monologue podcast. Maybe my introduction on my very first podcast to introduce what the podcast was about. Everything else has been an interview style, because that's where I get my power from. I get my energy from meeting people. I'm an extrovert, and I get that energy from meeting people and soaking up their knowledge. I learn so much on podcasts. I've learned stuff from you already, and we've only spoke twice, and it's like, and it's just, I love doing it. So one thing I did want to slide back on what you said, and it kind of sprinkles into both of my podcasts and just the entrepreneurial world, and how people can fail at entrepreneurship in that startup phase, is you said something that really kind of made the hair in my hairs tingle in the back of my neck, and it's a hard ride. I have story after story about times that I have done entrepreneurial things, trying to start up different types of businesses, from MLMs all the way to my first responder mental health course that I created. That was a real blow to the gut when no one wanted to come to my podcast, or not podcast, but my webinars to learn what my system is. So I had to really realize that was a lot of hard work. So with that being said, the hard work part does come with many different things: procrastination, anxiety. It comes, as an entrepreneur, it comes with people pleasing. And that is actually someone who I want to speak of right now. And we'll do a sponsor plug right now, and then we'll come back and we'll speak more about it. But want to hear from my sponsor. It talks on this, and then we can dive in a little bit of that section right after this. So word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back. Let me ask you a question. Would your life be better if whatever you're struggling with, you could finally break free of? So what am I talking about? The Funky Five. What's the Funky Five, you ask? It's those oh-so-familiar struggles: procrastination, people-pleasing, perfectionism, low self-confidence, and the one I call the big A, anxiety. For years, I struggled to manage my own version. I call them my Funky Three. I had 3 of these Funky Five weighing me down. I've tried just about everything to deal with them. Then a guest on my podcast, Daniel Packard, shared with me a profound thought that I had never thought of. So Daniel, a UC Berkeley engineer, spent 8 years working with this team and over 3,000 people to create an approach that doesn't just help you manage these issues, it actually frees you from them by getting right to the root of what's holding you back. So after meeting with Daniel, I decided to give it a shot, and within 6 short weeks, gone. Truly gone. I was so amazed. The number one thing I was dealing with was procrastination. But miraculously, a deeper-rooted struggle with people-pleasing, something I'd been unknowingly battling for a lifetime, lifted entirely. And the anxiety that came with them both, gone as well. Are you tired of battling any of your funky fives? People-pleasing, procrastination, perfectionism, low self-confidence, and the biggest happy killer of them all, the A word, anxiety. Imagine how much better life would be if you weren't just managing these things, but free of them, quickly, and yes, permanently. If you're ready for a real solution, head to danielpackard.com and get his free 90-minute training. Daniel himself will walk you through what makes his approach so different and teach you a technique you can use immediately to start feeling the difference. So if any of the Funky Five, or maybe your own version of the Funky Five, are holding you back, don't wait. Visit danielpackard.com. You can truly get results and start living the life you want. Okay, now we're back, and, give a call if anything that was said in that sponsored plug there, if it resonated with you, if you are feeling the anxieties, the people-pleasing, the procrastination of entrepreneurship, don't hesitate to give Daniel a call. Daniel Packard is someone who helped me have a whole new look on life, not only in my first responder world with all the stuff that we see there and how I can focus now and use the tools that he taught me, but also I utilize his system within my entrepreneurship. So let's get back to that a little bit. We just talked about how anxiety and procrastination and people-pleasing and self-sabotage can destroy you with my sponsor. Talk a little bit about that, what you talk to people if you can see that they're having some struggles when it comes to one of those areas.
Yeah, so I'm not a tactical guy, right?
Gotcha.
I'm a strategic guy, and so I don't deal at the tactical level unless I clearly understand what people are trying to achieve. What does their journey look like? And I've had to create, we talked about this, I had to create my own strategic game planning process, okay, which literally we do in 48 hours. That sets out a just about right strategy for a business and then spends most of its time, detailing out how you're going to execute it. What I find is most people wallow in the tactics. They love to chase technology. They want to adapt AI. They want to do social media and all that kind of stuff without a context, without a framework. And I keep saying to them, look, one of the reasons that you're anxious is you don't know what the hell you're doing. Okay, so let's get that straight. Let's get your head on straight. Take a step back. Create context, strategic context, which will drive your activities. And it reminds me of a client and now a close friend that came to me about a year ago and said, Roy, you got to help me. He says, I don't know what I'm doing. I just don't know what I'm doing. And so we talked, and I said, well, I know why you don't know what you're doing, and that's because you don't know what you're doing. Now, what I mean by that...
You don't know what you don't know.
What I mean by that is you don't have a framework. Look, we all need structure.
Yeah.
Okay, we all need structure. This isn't a free-flowing thing. It is after you've done the work, figuring out who you want to be when you grow up. Okay, so I would say to people on this call, go back, get the work done. You need framework, you need context. There's a lot of tools that I had to create. Like when I did this, it wasn't because it was driven by anxiety. It was driven because I was handed the growth machine. And I had to make sure that we could grow this puppy. Otherwise, I wasn't doing my job. Well, the only way I could do that was to have a meaningful framework of strategy that was built to execute. And once I was able to do that, everybody knew their job. Now, they may have been anxious around that, but you couldn't tell me that you're anxious because you didn't know what you were doing. You knew exactly what you're doing, and so that leads to other issues and so forth. But I find that the work, you have to do your work. And most people don't want to do their work. I'm sorry. They just don't. It's too easy to grapple and wallow in tactics.
Well, And part of that is the with the technologies that you speak of, to DTW is what I call it, do the work. I've actually had a sticky note on my, I don't have it anymore. I just moved to a new studio, but DTW was something that I have planted my teeth in. Like, you've got to do the work. I'm a paramedic. If I go on a difficulty breathing and I deliver them to the hospital and they're no better off than when I first saw them, I didn't do the work. I've got to do the work, right? I've got to put my protocol in place and help this person. So it's no different in your own business. You've got to do the work. And another one that I use that's kind of catchy, and I know that it's not my own. I don't know where I heard it from. I'm sure I heard it from somebody in the world, but it's the plan your work and work your plan. But you've got your framework that you speak of is just that. The framework is talking about plan your work, and then you work your plan.
Yeah, and it, not to be mistaken by working hard in doing the things that you're doing. I'm not talking about that. That's efficiency, and that's intensity, right? What I'm talking about is taking a step out of that world and framing your journey. Then do that, okay? It's like one leads to another. Like, for example, it's no different. I mean, if you don't know what your differentiation strategy is, how can you do anything? I mean, for God's sakes, what are you doing every day if you don't know how you're going to be different, right? You will end up, I guarantee you will end up doing, okay, things that are consistent with the narrative of the day. Okay, you'll end up chasing stuff like we talked about earlier, as opposed to pursuing the things that make sense for you and your personal objectives. And that's the work I'm talking about. I'm often asked, why don't people sort of gravitate to that easily? And I can tell you why. Because the education system, right, doesn't teach it. The education system, puts all this stuff on our head that says, okay, I got an MBA, so when I'm going to start this business, I'm entitled to 7 figures. Okay, so I just got to screw around and I'll figure it out. Well, no, that's not what happens. That's not the way the real world happens, right? And so people come to the entrepreneurial table, okay, with a menu of things that they have been taught will make them successful. Well, I got news for you, dude. They may have taught you how to think and solve problems, and that's important, but they will never guarantee you success, because there's another layer of practicality and stuff that you learn in the on the coal face with customers and competitors that they can't teach you. Why can't they teach you that? Because they never run $1 billion a year business. That's why. They're professors in academia, and I'm not denigrating them. They have their role, but it is not providing guidance to an entrepreneur who's having this conversation, because they will promulgate theories, concepts, ideologies, formularization, none of which, okay, are particularly helpful when you have to execute in a world that's messy, chaotic, unpredictable. I mean, it just doesn't work, because the real world, it isn't all things remaining equal. We don't hold a number of variables constant and solve for why, for God's sake. And yet, that's what happens. And so when people come and they start getting anxious, I think one of the reasons that they're anxious is nothing they've been taught is working, dude. And the reason for that, it's not working because it's not applicable. And so they need to start listening to the guys like us who have been there, done that. And we need to do a better job. Quite frankly, one of my biggest failings is I'm not happy with the amount of adoption I'm seeing out there to breaking away, to being contrarian, to being disruptive, to being the only one, to using the audacious kind of things that work for us, because they're so simple. And people don't think the simple things can actually work, because they've been taught that complexity is key.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, yeah, exactly. So real quick, when it comes to how people find you, because I think that's a great place for you to start talking about what you do for people and how they find you and what you have available, because, I'm already motivated, and I know the first time that we spoke, you have some systems in place that are very interesting and I'm going to be a part of. And I can't wait to be a part of that. I did want to have another conversation with you at another time about some specifics about that. But when it comes to how they find you and what you have that they can dive in to find out where what other type of services you provide, and the groups and the networking that you have that's already built. Which I've been there. I've been to the site. I've been and I looked at all the people that are in part of one of the things that Roy talks about and uses as one of his tools. And so speak on that a little bit.
Okay, so my home is bedifferentorbedead.com, and I've had this website for a number of years. This stuff is not new for me. It's stuff that I've been working with for 40 years, quite frankly, and worked with a lot of clients to help them. But you can visit me at bedifferentorbedead.com. I've tried to put as many resources on my website as possible. And so like I write blogs every week. Every Monday there's a new blog. Come and subscribe to my blog. If the content is appealing, you'll get content every week. And I've been doing this since '09, Kyle. So there's a lot of content out there on things like chasing yummy, strategic game planning, hiring for goosebumps, killing dumb rules, cutting the crap, increasing the viscosity of the machine, all these kind of notions that other people don't talk about. And so you can find that. Plus, I've got a quiz on my website, right, which is kind of fun. If you want to find out where you are on the kind of like scale of be different or be dead in categories like leadership, strategic planning, customer service, careers. I write a lot about careers because I use the same content, be different or be dead, in terms of career development. Kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So come visit me there. There's some testimonials in there that you might find interesting as well. But I also have an email. That's roy.osing@gmail.com. And I'm really happy to have a conversation with anybody, okay, specifically. And I do it's so gratifying. I have to tell you, I do have people sending me an email with their draft-only statement, which is my way of expressing competitive advantage. We are the only ones who, not we are the best, we are better, we're number one. That's claptrap. You'll read a lot about claptrap on my website as well. So I created the only statement. I have people sending them to me and say, hey, Roy, here's my draft-only statement. What do you think? And so we have an opportunity to engage. So use the website, engage with me. I'd love to help out. And look, at the end of the day, all I really want to do here, Kyle, is change the conversation. Change the conversation out there away from, all the stuff driven by academia, to be perfectly frank, and move that to stuff being driven by practicality. Like I have an MBA. But it's not the MBA you think. It's a master's in business achievement. It's not a master's in business administration. So I want more achievers, right? That's what this world is about. Performance. It's not about cognition. It's about translating cognition into stuff that lights fires in people and gets stuff done. And can you imagine?
Like the ignition path right there,
Boom,
the fire.
Exactly. That's why we're having this conversation.
I named it right, baby. No.
I keep thinking.
I love it when people say when they reference the subject of my podcast while in the conversation. When I have my other podcast, which shameless plug, I'll talk about that too. It's called Elevate, and it's for first responders and their family members, and even healthcare professionals that may be struggling with mental health. There's a lot of resources on there, and we talk about a lot of things from PTSD to different alternative versions of mental health therapy and mental health help. But often in the conversation, someone will say the word, we just want to elevate our first responders. And I'm like, yes. And I didn't even prompt them.
Boom. You want to go boom.
Yeah. So one thing, your episode is going to air. I think it's next week. I think it's Christmas Eve is when your episode airs. I think I may have one in front of you. It's Christmas Eve. It's within the next 2 weeks. Either way, it's before the first of the year.
Awesome.
So at the end of the year, we always have this in the entrepreneurial world. I mean, I was on a webinar just yesterday that talked about goal setting for 2025. So a lot of people are in that mode of winding down one year and restarting their new year. What is some just real quick advice that you'd give someone that you can talk about? Maybe one or two things that you can do in this interim period between before the holidays, just after the holidays, and then moving into the new year that can really help their entrepreneurial path.
I'm smiling because it's funny. I just finished writing a blog post about the 2025 resolution. It's really simple. Okay, what you need to think through as an entrepreneur is you need to think through how you can be the only one that does what you do. And so if you have nothing else to do in 2025, do that. Work on that, because that's the essence of differentiation. It's the essence of being different or being dead. It's the essence of growth. It's the essence of customer, what I will say, dazzlement. Okay, it's all about how you can position yourself as the only one that does what you do around something other people care about. Okay, and the point I want to make, Kyle, this is not about you. It's about you being unique in terms of serving others. So it's exactly the antithesis of narcissism. I've had too many people say, well, hey, Roy, look at the color of my hair. I'm different. I go, whoa, that's not exactly what I'm talking about. I don't care about the color of your hair. I don't care about your pronouns. I don't care about your sexual preference. What I care about is what you are doing unique that serves other people. And so as you think about 2025, everybody out there, I want you to think through what we've talked about today and have it manifest itself in you doing some work around creating what you're unique at in a way that serves others, what you're the only at. Forget about better, forget about best, forget about leading, forget about number oneing that has all been promulgated by academics of our world. Do what Roy's asking you to do. Try and be the only one that does what you do, because that is the ultimate expression of differentiation. That's what I'd like you to do next year, and think about it until you hit January the 1st. Do the work. Let's have a conversation.
That's awesome. DWRD. Do what Roy does. Well, Roy, thank you so much for coming on the Ignition Path podcast. I think that this has been a very good episode with a lot of great information. You've given so much value to the listeners that tune in. I can't wait for this one to go live, because if someone really sinks their teeth into this episode, they're really going to get a lot of value and get a lot of points that were so graciously shared with by you. So thanks so much for coming on. Don't forget to find Roy on Be Different or Be Dead website. I'll also put, I'm not sure when your blog goes live. If it's live, it'll probably be live before this airs. I'll put a link to the direct log itself, or a blog, because that'll take it directly to it. So I'll make sure my listeners can find that blog easily, because that's some great information for this time frame that we're all dealing with. And I was in a workshop yesterday for goals, and it was really good. I've worked on how to set goals in my past, and it was a great refresher. And it was just like, oh wow, okay, yeah, that's I need to remember to do that. You lose focus sometimes once you're working your goals to how to reestablish your goals. So,
absolutely right.
But don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. If you're listening to this and you know of an entrepreneur that needs to hear this, don't hesitate to share it. We're all about growth. If you have any comments, please, if you're watching this on YouTube, leave some comments. When I view the comment section on a weekly basis on all of my episodes, I go through and I see who's left comments, and I respond to every single comment. If it's something that's specifically asked of Roy, I can always push that to him, or let him know, hey, there's a comment that you could respond to. So comment. That helps us grow the YouTube channel, which helps grow the message. And of course, Apple, Spotify, and all the major podcasting areas to find this content if you're not watching us. So thanks again, Roy, for coming on. I really appreciate your time this morning. And you guys, I'll probably speak to you before the holidays, because I'll let you know when this stuff goes live. But nonetheless, have a great holiday. I know that you're a little bit further north than me, so you'll actually probably have snow.
We don't.
But
we don't yet, but I suspect it may show up.
I suspect you will. Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Thanks so much, Roy. Take care.
You're welcome, Kyle. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Ignition Path, fueling the entrepreneurial fire.